of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, November 4th, 2020. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Biden could be declared the winner as early as this afternoon, or not. Meanwhile, the blue wave never shows. It's a down-ballot disaster. Democratic Senate unlikely. Republicans look to gain up to 10 seats in the House. May have had one state legislature flip. Wisconsin called for Biden, but recount likely. Georgia will have at least one runoff race for the Senate, maybe two. Meanwhile, Trump gains with voters of color. Proposition 22 in California wins. Labor laws shattered. $15 minimum wage passes in Florida. And a graduated income tax fails in Illinois. Good news is the drug war loses big time. Squad all won their re-election. Added to their numbers. Kara Eastman, not one of those. The first transgender state senator in U.S. history is elected. And a North Dakota state senator wins despite the fact that he died of COVID almost a month ago. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us today. Sort of a special show, I guess. We are sort of in recovery mode from yesterday. We did 13 and a half hours. Emma's here with me. Good job, Emma. That was a nice trial by fire. It's the way that we initiate all new members of the show.
Yeah.
We do a 13-hour show.
Well, hopefully other introductions aren't as emotionally draining as watching the results last night. I mean, in hindsight, we all knew a red mirage was likely and possible, but still, it could not have been more nerve-wracking, and it's still not official today. But. Exactly,
and sadly, some of that mirage turned out to not be a mirage. I think I did not see anyone predicting a loss of seats, a net loss of seats in the House for the Democrats. There was certainly, I felt a high level of confidence that the Democrats would take the Senate. It was unclear whether it would be with a 1 or 2 vote margin or maybe a 5 or 6 vote margin. I should say it would actually have been larger than that, right? I mean, we're contemplating the idea of is it possible there could be a 55-seat Democratic caucus in the Senate, which would have been a 10-vote margin. We did not see the state races materialize. What we did see was, and this is and we're going to get into the Biden's race, and I think if there is a real indictment here in terms of a failure on the Democratic side, I suspect it is one, in terms of tactics. Two, in terms of the Democratic leadership, the legislative leadership, because we had a situation where Joe Biden, if he does end up winning, will have secured the most votes in the history of the country in terms of presidential wins. Now, of course, our population gets bigger, but even accounting for population growth, the problem is that the Democrats have failed, and this was Joe Biden's strategy from day one, was referendum on Donald Trump. And the stats that sticks with me from last night was that even in counties where coronavirus deaths were the highest, Trump gained on his numbers there. I'm not sure how you deal with that, but what you can deal with, the down ballot races, is basically politics and attacking not just Donald Trump, but the foundation upon which he sits, which is the Republican Party. And this isn't even a necessarily, there's some ideology involved in this. I mean, presumably, because Democrats are presumably different than Republicans. But even if it was all just kabuki, like, perform kabuki well, like engage in partisan politics.
Right.
And there were so many opportunities where particularly Nancy Pelosi in the House simply refused to use any of the power they had to fight Republicans over the past 2 years. And that's not necessarily meaning there's no expectation that they can pass legislation unilaterally. I mean, they can, and they did. But I'm talking about actually engaging in politics where you convince voters that your side is better than the other side. It's that crass. And that just involves a skill set and a perception of what's going on and reading the room. Nancy Pelosi could have the most neo-lib, retrograde economic policies, corporatist policies in the world, and she could still performatively, just for the sake of winning, done a whole host of things.
Well, I still don't understand the lack of interest in running against Mitch McConnell. She's always the boogie woman when it comes to the right. I mean, that sounds groovy, but in fact, it's more just she's always the figurehead, and she has dismal approval ratings for that very reason. McConnell is not much better, and the Democrats, for some reason, refuse to capitalize on that. You could have run on the stimulus. Biden's lack of coherent policy vision seems to, and we don't know everything yet, have affected these down ballot races in a way that is incredibly consequential. I think it's quite hard to be excited or relieved about a Biden win without retaking the Senate. And that's a result of his inability to make that case, because then people see that reflection onto those races and onto those candidates. It just didn't happen. I mean, the Cunningham race is fairly astounding.
Well, I would argue that part of the reason why, I think Biden didn't want to make an attempt. I think he wanted to keep his head down. But part of the reason why Biden, I don't even think could have done it if he wanted to, was because of the abject failure of the Democratic leaders in the House and the Senate to actually create a pre-existing narrative. Right? I mean, Look, I don't know who was responsible for Nancy Pelosi not agreeing to that $1.8 trillion stimulus. But I mean, I was saying this over and over again, that had she approved of it, even with 2 weeks out, like the idea that it would have helped Donald Trump that much, it just seems like there is clearly a partisan polarized divide in this country. The Democrats pulled out their votes. Republicans pulled out their votes. Donald Trump was able to essentially squeeze more, yield more out of his people than anybody anticipated he could. And there was no obstacles for him to do that. And the only obstacles that would have been there to do it were if Nancy Pelosi had forced Mitch McConnell.
Put the ball in his court.
Put the ball in his court and make him, and they failed to do this, and people who've listened to this program for an extended period of time will know this was all I could say for about a year and a half in the run-up to the election in 2016 and the year following. It was like Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan were essentially allowed to go, take a vacation from the months of August to November in 2016. There was no attempt, and it continued on. There was no attempt to implicate the entire Republican Party with Donald Trump, to tie them together. Not until the impeachment, and even then it was half-hearted.
But they're having Republicans speak at the convention.
Exactly.
There's no interest in making that case.
Exactly.
They're accepting the help of the Lincoln Project openly, warmly. It's about we're America, we're this, we're that.
How does that help down ballot?
Exactly.
How do you have Kasich there, and these Republicans speak at your national convention, and then argue that there's something wrong with Republicans? You can't. Now, this was their strategy, and they executed it to a T, and it was an ill-conceived, stupid strategy that they can never seem to let go of. And if you accept the $1.8 trillion, that is not what you want. You force Mitch McConnell to either vote for it or against it. And by him, I mean every one of those senators in the caucus. And the caucus would have split because they all thought they were in danger. And the idea of Republicans splitting and at war with each other is what you need. It is the only way. Look, the polarization is such that unless you have Republicans fighting Republicans, and I don't mean half a dozen political operatives who have no constituency. The only constituency Steve Schmidt has, or that Stuart Stevens has, or that Jennifer Rubin has, or that Bill Kristol has, are viewers of MSNBC, maybe some on CNN, and they're all voting for Biden 4 years ago. They're like, they were all going to vote for the Democrat before they ever even heard those names. They have no constituency in the Republican Party. So don't tell me that there were Republicans fighting against Republicans. They have no constituency. No one has elected them to anything. They're just people who have jobs. Stuart Stevens came on this program and said, I was a mercenary. It was more or less saying like, I believe some of it, but, I'm getting paid for this shit. And that's basically it. No, when I say have Republicans fight Republicans, you have people who are counting on the votes of tens or hundreds of thousands or millions of people fighting other people who are Republicans who are counting on the votes of tens or hundreds of thousands or millions of Republican voters. And you start to pit them together at each other. Because that is the one thing the Republicans automatically have that Democrats don't have, which is a cohesiveness because they're basically a white party. Donald Trump picked up a couple of points, yes, of people of color, but they are basically, for all intents and purposes, 95% a white party. And the way that you dislodge it, and I'm not saying you're going to crush the party and it's going to be, but we're, 2 or 3%. 4%, 5% margins here are huge, is you make them fight each other. This is basic politics. Wedge issue. What is the wedge issue that the Democrats deployed one time over the past 4 or 5 years?
Denounce Trump tweets.
Honestly, that's it.
Yeah.
They have not deployed the most basic political weapon that exists one time. The idea that there hasn't been one occasion to do this over the course of the 2 years the Democrats controlled the House, the idea there hasn't been one opportunity to have a wedge issue is just, it's just complete political malpractice. There's been a total lack of oversight by the Democrats. They took control of the House. how did they exercise that power? The only thing one you can point to is the impeachment. And they did that kicking and screaming. And they did it half-heartedly. And they did it only narrowly tailored for the election. There was no broader message. There was just as if like nothing exists except for in that moment.
Yeah. And by the way, bring up impeachment now. Not most voters, but a good amount of voters probably think it was about Russia. I bet they couldn't even tell you about Ukraine and all those issues. I mean, it was so specific and so about what the elites in Washington care about and had very few consequences for actually material conditions for people that it just, no one's making those connections. I mean, was impeachment discussed at all in the past year of 2020?
I mean, the Democrats simply ran away from it. They simply ran away from it, tried to get it out of the way as soon as possible. Chuck Schumer, the idea that he allowed those hearings to happen. How do you make a case against Republicans in an era where the chairman or the chairwoman of your Judiciary Committee, perhaps the most prominent committee in terms of what the American public sees, right? I mean, what other committees are televised? And we've had multiple televised judicial hearings over the past 2 years. And the chairman of that committee hugs, I mean, literally and metaphorically hugs Lindsey Graham. Susan Collins has won in Maine. According to LA Times DC reporter, Sarah Gideon just called to concede to Susan Collins. That is just
unbelievable
malpractice. And now my understanding is that there is some local aspects to Susan Collins winning. There was like some, Maine, I don't know, cardigan.
There's Maine machine politics that exist up there.
Well, my understanding is actually had to do with this like sportscaster who cut an ad in the last 2 weeks, who was sort of a beloved Maine figure. But the bottom line is, if you allow these Republicans to define themselves distinct from the most odious person in the world that you've told everybody about, just even like allowing them to do that, right? I'm not the most odious person in the world. I'm not associated with the most odious person in the world is enough to give a lot of these Republicans who are living in a polarized environment license to vote for that person. And it's just an abject failure by the leadership of of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi.
This race was not supposed to be close. Gideon was supposed to trounce Collins. That was every poll prognosticator, everyone following the race thought this would be done, after the Kavanaugh vote. It is failure is too light of a word to describe.
And Chuck
happened in Maine.
Chuck Schumer is intimately involved with picking these candidates. And that's why there's a consistency to them. Completely bland, completely afraid of, never mind from an ideological perspective, just completely afraid to sort of take on the brand of Republicans. I mean, to some extent, Joe Biden did the exact same thing too. It was really just not that the Republicans are bad. It's just he's so odious. He personally is so odious. And I don't know that may necessarily push him over the edge. It could be just people really do find Donald Trump odious. But if you do not engage in politics, if you completely reduce it to, which one of us is going to make a better president of the senior class, honestly, which one of us is going to get, oh my God. I don't doubt it. the idea that that Arizona is a function of the Lincoln Project. Give me a break. I'm sorry.
I think the thing that I'm going to be emphasizing is one, what Weigel's been saying about Ilhan's door-to-door stuff in Minnesota. And I haven't looked as closely in Arizona, but I heard that Bernie people were central there too. So I want to look more into that. I don't know if you guys have heard that part.
Weigel had a tweet that, and we spoke to him about this. He spent the last days of the campaign going out with Ilhan Omar, who was doing door-to-door campaigning, was actually going out, and we mentioned that yesterday on the program. And the numbers there, the bump that Biden got in that area, trying to find that frickin' tweet, and I can't find it now, but were significant. There was a significant bump there that they got from going out door to door. And I think we had mentioned this last night too, was in the wake of, or in the run up to the election in 2016, we heard a lot about, we don't need to have canvassers. We've come up with algorithms and data that we've so finely honed that we know exactly where our voters are. And so we don't need people to go out there. That's why we're not deploying people in that way. And then we find out that their voter identifications are completely wrong. They're going and performing Get Out the Vote, and 25% of the people they're doing for it are voting for their opponent. They're voting for Donald Trump. And I have a feeling the idea of, we heard these stories of like, turns out the data says you don't need to be knocking on doors. You can just like maybe do a robocall or something like that. I think that is also one of those sort of like retroactive rationalizations because you don't have the resources in the form of excited volunteers to go out and knock on doors. I don't think there's any guarantee here, but I mean, we're talking about margins, tiny margins. And Joe Biden did have numbers that were out there, but sometimes you need to actually do even better. And you also need to depress the votes of your opponents. And the way you do that is by making it clear that there's something fundamentally wrong with your opponents. Not just that the president is bad and hope that it trickles down, particularly when that president is like the leader of a death cult.
But again, we're seeing a short-sightedness that is just maddening, and it's not the bug, it's the feature of Democrats. So they rode with Obama in 2008 on an anti-war strategy, basically, and then Obama for America took over and decimated how Democrats were running elections previously, making it so data-focused and consultant-focused. And then what do you know? That it reaped what they sowed, and they didn't have success and still haven't had success for the decade after that. And so they only can clearly see what's right in front of them. And right now it's coronavirus and Trump. And yes, coronavirus was the number one issue for people. And I think that Biden's going to pull it off because it was a rebuke against Trump's response. But outside of that, you need to wield power. It's not just about defeating the one guy at the top, because this is going to keep happening. I mean, we are so gerrymandered, and it's also just the partisanship in the country. I understand that, and I'm not one to blame voters, anything like that. But there's something wrong right now. I don't think Bernie would have won or done better than Biden here. There's something fundamentally wrong with the overall strategy, not just from Biden. So it's easy to blame Biden, like you were saying, Sam, but it really is more on Schumer.
That's what I think, because I think that like if there's no platform and there's no fundamental sort of like, there needs to be from day one, from today until the next election, the Democrats need to take every opportunity they have to show, not tell, not go on and say the words on cable television, but to show. The best example I have is just sort of like, is those hearings. I mean, I don't mean to overweight those judiciary hearings for Amy Coney Barrett, although I don't know that it's possible to exaggerate their importance, frankly. But
save them 2 Senate seats.
I mean,
at least.
But don't worry, the Democrats raised a ton of money off of it and did
nothing with that money. But the point is that, like, you cannot go in and tell people in that committee this is a sham. You need to show them that it's a sham. And how do you show people who are, barely paying attention that a meeting is a sham? How do you show them that? You either don't go in to the meeting, you stand out in front of the door, or you go into the meeting and then you make an issue of it and you all stand up and you walk out. That's how you show it. When you tell people, all you're doing is showing them that it's not a sham, because people just aren't listening. You got to show it. And the Democrats do not show it. It's the same with the HEROES Act. Yes, if the voter just took the time to read through that $3.4 trillion bill, they would find things maybe on page 335, maybe on page 210, maybe on page 160 or page 75, things that they like. I mean, they'd find things on page 400 that they don't like the Cobra, thing, if they understood that. Or you could just show the Republicans that there's something wrong with the way that they're handling the stimulus by forcing them to fight amongst themselves about it. But they didn't do that. They just thought that the plan was, we're going to lay low. And, we had some decent results, decent results on initiatives around the country. The worst, of course, is Proposition 22 in California. That was saying it's about Uber and Lyft is, I think, undersells the implications of it. It was funded largely by Uber and Lyft. It was an attempt to pull back on earlier legislation but the bottom line is that the implications for our labor laws across the country are going to be is dire. There's going to be a lot of people working and being, what we used to call misclassified, and no longer misclassified. They're just not going to have the opportunity to build any Social Security savings. They're not going to have the ability to be protected by certain labor laws. And that's going to be the law of the land. And part of that is, that is if people are looking for sort of an example of how there is some measure of corporate corruption in the Democratic Party, that's a good place to start.
We did an interview on TMBS with Marshall Steinbaum in September about sectoral bargaining, and this is very much, Uber and Lyft are already celebrating this as the model federally, and I think, unfortunately, they're going to have a lot of ears of Democratic policymakers on that, because Harvard has this clean slate initiative, which is basically just this federally.
Yeah, and I think that, the reason why you didn't see, again, you have this sort of broader problem of the Democrats just don't push these things, as a matter of just sort of first principles. But also the other part of it was these companies are just rife with former Democratic operatives.
Right. Is David Plouffe still
I don't think
at
he is,
Uber?
but I imagine he still owns a bunch of stock and he's still friends with everybody.
Well, it's exactly. We're seeing this with Silicon Valley. We're seeing this with these rideshare companies and these tech companies. Their teeth have been sunken into the Democratic Party for a while now, and this California proposition is as clear as it could possibly be in that area. And this has wide implications just for winning for Democrats, which they ostensibly care about. Biden wants to fashion himself as the labor candidate, while not really supporting labor very much. But he wants to think of himself in that way. This undercuts that significantly. It's not going to get a ton of attention because it's in a blue state, but we're seeing this throughout the country. I mean, we're seeing this in Virginia, where they have Democratic leadership and they're undercutting labor laws. They have terrible labor protections in Virginia, even as it turns blue. Democrats turning away from that has implications beyond just winning right now or what your specific objectives are right in front of you. Republicans don't think this way. They think about making long-lasting changes. This is why McConnell successfully prioritized getting Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court, because they're thinking many steps ahead, and he just shooed the stimulus package also because Pelosi didn't put it in his put the ball in his court.
Yep.
So this is just another frustrating example. I mean, Democrats really want to side against labor here. That's okay. Good luck.
What's stunning to me, is looking like who some of the people that lost. Donna Shalala lost in Florida. I mean, the Florida Democratic Party, my understanding, is just garbage.
Yeah,
like they're just bad at what they do. But Donna Shalala has been just I'm sorry, she was, just incredibly conflicted, I think. And that came out, but Nancy Pelosi insisted on putting her in charge of the oversight for the Fed and the Treasury and Fed bailout of corporations. She was supposedly in charge of the oversight. All it basically did is expose her to a tremendous amount of conflicts. Lost Democrats in New Mexico, in Oklahoma, we lost one here on Staten Island. Sherry Bustos, who is in charge of the DCCC, which is the House institution that supposedly helps reelect Democratic congresspeople. She was famous for blacklisting any firms who worked with challengers, unless, of course, it was like Nancy Pelosi endorsing a challenge to Ed Markey in the Senate.
Silent there.
Or if it was like, encouraging a challenge, let's say to AOC or something to that effect. But she looks like she might lose in Illinois.
Also, Tom Suozzi on Long Island looks like he's gonna lose.
Yep.
Now, there was Melanie. He had a progressive primary challenge and he won. And now we're gonna lose that seat, most likely. And losing ground, the Democrats losing ground in the House is unbelievable incompetence.
Could be 10 seats or so.
Unreal.
Lost. Now, if you're looking for some good news, we'll go over a couple of these initiatives that have passed that have been positive. But broadly speaking, the best spin I am working on right now to make you feel a little bit better. This is presuming Joe Biden wins. If Joe Biden doesn't win, it's a disaster that, because we will lose another Supreme Court seat without a doubt. I mean, even with Joe Biden winning, what we'll end up having is a 6-2 court, I would imagine, by the end of the next 4 years, or certainly if Breyer retires or passes over the next 2 years anyways. But here is, if you're looking for a positive story, assuming that Joe Biden wins, and I should say also at this point that Josh Orton, who was on our program yesterday, I think his title is Merida's executive producer. He upgraded himself. Last night came on, and it was late. It was probably around 11 o'clock or so, or is it 9 or 10?
He was on at 9.
9, okay. So hour 9 of the day of the 13. And at 9 o'clock last night, he said, look, Don't panic. I think he's going to do okay in the upper Midwest. And I think he's going to eke this out. It's definitely not going to be any type of landslide anywhere, but he's going to probably eke this out. So if that carries through, tweet at Josh Orton that I said that he was right. But
well, he responded to me and said, what do I win?
Oh, well, okay. He wins a Carpenter's pencil, of course. Majority Report, all 4 of the Carpenter pencils that are available at store.majorityreportradio.com. Here's the somewhat hopeful take for progressives.
Oh boy.
And I'm not gonna lie. This involves, like, you got to stretch a little bit. You got to limber up to appreciate this. But the 2022 Senate cycle looks very doable for a pickup, for 2 or 3 pickups. You got Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania resigning. You've got Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. These are 2 states that seem to be coming back into the Democratic fold. Both those Senate seats are pick-upable, conceivably. We don't know what's going to happen in Georgia. Warnock is going to run against Loeffler. I think the winner of that is up again in 2 years.
Yes, it's insanely bizarre.
It's bizarre because first she was appointed, and this is a special election, and the special election is just to fill the term of Isaacson, I guess it was. So that race will happen again in Georgia, and Georgia seems to be trending in the right direction, more or less.
Yeah, it doesn't look like Biden will actually pull off Georgia, but it was a lot closer than the initial results indicated because of that water main break in Atlanta and other late reporting from areas that are more Democratic.
And who knows who will run in that seat in 2 years? I mean, maybe
Right.
Stacey Abrams does come back and run. I don't know. But Richard Burr is up for re-election in North Carolina. He won his race by less than 6 points in 2000. It would have been 2016, which, as you know, was not a great year for the Democrats. So that's not an impossibility in terms of a pickup. You might have maybe, I don't know where else you'd have an opportunity. Maybe Roy Blunt in Missouri, maybe. So there's an opportunity maybe there to pick up 2 or 3 seats. You could get close to a very slim majority in the Senate.
And just more lottery tickets in the sense that more Republicans are up for re-election than Democrats.
I think it's like 22 Republicans are up and 12 Democrats are up for re-election in 2022. Now, what you also have in 2023, it seems to me, is a very strong likelihood that Nancy Pelosi will not be the leader of the Democrats in the House. I mean, it is almost impossible to imagine. It is increasingly hard for me to imagine that the Democrats in the House are not going to say sayonara to her in the next month or 2. I mean, this is a dismal loss. It's an abject failure. It is hard to imagine a scenario. Look, the Democrats were elected 2 years ago. What did they do with that? Did they provide the oversight they promised? Absolutely not. No, by no ways, no measure, no how. Their signature bill that they passed, their day one bill, wasn't literally day one, was H.R. 1. Voting reforms, a whole slew of things. Do you remember that? The answer is no. You do not remember that. I will tell you why. Because on the day that they were passing it, Nancy Pelosi was slagging Ilhan Omar, was wasting all of the ink and the news media to distance herself from Ilhan Omar, who incidentally probably was a key ingredient to Joe Biden's win in Minnesota. Certainly one and her allies, the squad, did quite well over the course of this cycle.
Ilhan Omar, for the viewers that may not know, did door knocking despite the Biden campaign saying they shouldn't do so.
And
She
the numbers,
yeah.
and the numbers in that county were up by almost like 25%.
I mean,
from Clinton, up 25%.
She wins the MVP. We gotta.
But I mean, I don't know if people remember that. But go back, Google 2 years from ago in January, I think it was, or February, first week of February. Look for the news of when HR 1 passes. Google Nancy Pelosi, and you will see her talking more about Ilhan Omar than she is about HR 1. They stepped all over their own rollout to prove how not Ilhan Omar they were.
Yeah, and I just want to put Hakeem Jeffries' name in the mix too, because his staff was also smearing Ilhan
absolutely
the same way. So he should not replace Pelosi.
Well,
I just want to put that
I was
up.
about to say he's quite likely he's on the top of the list of candidates that will
That's
be
why
likely
he's
to
there.
replace.
He boxed out Barbara Lee for the fourth seat.
Right. And
unacceptable from my perspective.
He's a fundraiser, so we have, then we would have a Speaker of the House from New York, prolific fundraiser, right? And then the leader of the Democrats in the Senate being there purely not for any coalition building purpose, not for any strategic purpose, the fact that they're good at getting compromises or that they're good at winning elections. No, it's because they're good at raising money. That can't happen. So
I mean, just think of the incredible political malpractice involved in those first 2 weeks, and it just set the tone for the entire time. So Democrats were elected in 2018, and they did. And look, I am quite aware of how the government works. They cannot unilaterally make things into law when they only control the House, but they can perform oversight. She told Richie Neal, you don't want to go after those taxes, you don't go after those taxes. I mean, it's just go Google Jeff Hauser at the Revolving Door Project and look at all of the things. I mean, I interviewed him maybe a dozen times over the past 2 years on Ring of Fire, maybe once or twice on this program, about the failure of the Democrats in the House to hold hearings. And they were given a small amount of power, and what they chose to do with it was to basically vaporize it. And they thought that somehow the vapors of power will go back in and feed them or in some way. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I can't come up with an analogy for it, but it's absurd.
I like vapors of power.
They vaporized it. Vapor of power? Yeah, they
vaped it.
They vaped their power.
They jeweled the power.
But the good news story is that we have a scenario where the Democrats could control the Senate conceivably in 2023, that we will have a different Democratic leadership. And frankly, I don't care if we have a leadership that is ideologically, is explicitly ideologically misaligned with the left. I mean, I would rather have Tim Ryan at this point because I think he's not terribly competent. I would rather have a weak leader in the House who is non-ideologically aligned with the left than a supposed lefty who is strong. But here's the thing. With that loss of 10 votes and the increase of the squad, they have more power now.
Yeah.
They have more power. They're whatever it is. Remember when Nancy Pelosi, they got 3 votes. Well, now they have closer to 6 or 7 or 8. And
proportionally, there's fewer Democrats because of you. So,
right. Not only have they doubled their size, more or less, as a squad, but the Democrats have lost 10 seats. So now you're looking at, I don't know exactly what it's going to turn out, but let's just say it's going to be about 225 to 210 in terms of the Republicans and the Democrats. We have less frontline Democrats. We have more squad members. their power increases. And I got news for Nancy Pelosi. They're going to use it. They are of a different generation who understand that when you have power, it is a use it or lose it situation.
Yeah. And just speaking on Pelosi strategically as being speaker, like I would take almost anyone else at this point, just also because it's more of a blank slate. And what strategic advantage does she provide when she has a 27% approval rating nationally? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And it's all about power and what she's accumulated when she's been there. But you're playing politics. This isn't a seniority at a company. She's the face of the Democrats in the House. You have to have someone who's good at making the case for the Democrats and whose face doesn't turn off more than 2/3 of the country and make them, feel badly about the party.
I don't even think it's a problem. I mean, I'm not as convinced that matters. I mean, Mitch McConnell is hated, right? But
they have strategic monetary advantages.
Stuff.
Yeah.
He's like pulling moves. He's hated because he has been so successful,
effective, right?
at killing Democratic legislation. But more importantly, like, can you imagine the Democrats ever having the balls to hold up, a nominee like they did with Merrick Garland? I mean, prior to Merrick Garland happening. And yet that move is as responsible for everything that has happened over the past 4 years as anything else. 25% of Republicans voted for Donald Trump because of that empty seat, supposedly. I don't think it's that high, but how high do you need it to be for it to have made that much of a difference? And it ultimately leads to a 6-3 Supreme Court that is shutting down the voting rights of people left and right. I mean, they know how to wield power. If they're going to be hated, it's going to be for a reason. Not just because, they're from San Francisco. They're actually going to act like they're from somewhere and do something. All right, let's go into sort of so the long and short of it is 2023, you're going to have Joe Biden possibly filling out the final 2 years of his term. maybe he'll do 8 years, but I find that hard to believe, but who knows? Filling out at least the last 2 years of his first term. You could have a slim margin in the Senate. You could have a House that is has a different leadership and in some respects is being held hostage by the left. And the terrain for passing legislation at that point could be different. Now, Chuck Schumer will not have the pressure of a primary. That will have passed by then. And I don't think that we're going to see Chuck Schumer booted from his leadership position in a way that I suspect we will with Nancy Pelosi, although that would be nice. But the upside is just simply that you will not get compromised legislation that will take place in the first 2 years of an administration. There's more of an opportunity to get more ambitious 2 years out. And there's more time for the left to gain and grow power so that when the fight actually happens, that they are a little bit more ripened, I guess.
The scary thing, though, is that we were counting on that supermajority to pass a massive stimulus bill as tens of millions of Americans are facing an economic challenge unlike this country has ever seen. And I'm including the Great Recession in that. And that means Biden is likely to strike compromises as the GOP pushes for austerity.
Yes.
And that is not going to meet the challenges. That is going to fall at the feet of Biden electorally and thus the Democrats.
Well, I mean, what we need is, the Democrats to pass something that is massive in the House and have Joe Biden and create pressure on the Republicans and actually do politics. But yes, I should have prefaced what I was saying about that sort of like stretchy positive story is that you have to also ignore the great potential we have for a lot of immiseration.
And no Green New Deal as a first legislative priority, or
and then
light.
What's going to happen if Biden wins, which I think is likely, and Donald Trump is a lame duck? I mean, the only upside there is that maybe he takes it out on the Republicans in the Senate. I have no idea.
No. I mean, he loses entire interest in the stimulus. He loses interest in doing everything.
Of course.
He loses interest in... That's why I was so bullish on her accepting the $1.8 trillion deal from Mnuchin, because once his self-interest is gone, there's nothing left.
Yep.
And we're about to go into, as Biden said, a dark, dark winter. And I'm only joking about that because it's so hard to... It's going to be a dark winter, is what I'm saying. And on top of all these increased coronavirus cases and mass death, we are in an economic situation that is perilous for people as they lose their homes, a mass homelessness crisis, tens of millions uninsured, wages down. And Pelosi chose to play politics in that moment.
Bad politics.
Bad politics. Yeah. Cherry on top of it too was, at the moment I knew it wasn't going to actually do anything, and in fact, they didn't just hold; they lost.
Yep. I don't know. From her argument will be, well, it prevented Donald Trump from winning if Biden.
Sure. Sure.
Here's some ballot initiatives of note. In Alaska, a yes vote would have abolished party primaries in favor of an open primary, but that lost. In Massachusetts, a yes vote would have had ranked choice voting. That lost. Though Democrats, well, we were, I guess, an hour or two ago, hoping that ranked choice voting would save us from Susan Collins in Maine. That didn't happen.
Huh.
In Missouri, a yes vote, and it appears that yeses hold, would limit campaign contributions to state Senate candidates. That's pretty good. Prohibit lawmakers from accepting gifts from lobbyists. Welcome to the 21st century. That seems like a pretty good anti-corruption measure.
Yeah, it's shocking how narrowly it...
Yeah, look at that. Oh, I guess we're no longer going to be able to accept bribes. Well, it's time. It's time.
I mean, what was that? It's like 1 point. They won by 1 point. No.
Also changes the state's redistricting commission from a non-partisan one to a bipartisan one. That narrowly passed. I'm not exactly sure what a non-partisan to a bipartisan one is. I think it's like we're going to appoint 5 Democrats, we're going to appoint 5 Republicans. Hopefully, it is actually like that as opposed to 6 or 4, depending on who wins in there. But I'm not sure. I don't know the details of that. Virginia has now an independent redistricting system as opposed to the legislatures. It is unclear. The maps have to be approved by the state legislature or they'll be drawn by the state Supreme Court, but it's unclear whether or not the Supreme Court of the U.S. will allow for something like that. I have a feeling that might be a question that rises there because of the notion that the state legislature can't delegate that type of authority. It's absurd, but Colorado stays in the National Popular Vote Compact. In Louisiana, there is an amendment, constitutional amendment, that there is no guarantee to a woman's right of abortion that would automatically happen in the event that Roe v. Wade is struck down. Colorado, on the other hand, rejected Proposition 115, which would have banned abortions in the state after 22 weeks. In Nevada, a renewable energy ballot initiative, question 6, that would mandate the state's electricity suppliers to reach 50% renewable energy by 2030. That looks like that is going to win. In Delaware, we have our first transgender state senator in U.S. history. Sarah McBride wins. She's the National Press Secretary for the Human Rights Campaign. Sadly, in California, California voters are rejecting a proposal to restore affirmative action at the state's public colleges and universities. And then we have, across the country, a whole host of positive anti-drug war initiatives. We have marijuana legalized for recreational purposes in like 4 states. In a couple other states, legal medical marijuana. In Oregon, all drugs were decriminalized. And in Oregon, and I think in Washington, D.C.,
decriminalized psychedelic mushrooms.
Indeed.
And something else, too, which I'm blanking
on. There may be more, but broadly, every single anti-drug war initiative put on a ballot won. California approves its initiative to expand voting rights to people who are on parole. They can vote. We mentioned 22. We mentioned the $15 minimum wage in Florida. I don't know. Where are we in terms of the presidential election? Anybody? Have we have any updates?
Well, Trump is officially calling for a recount of Wisconsin, which...
What? No, we need to know the results now.
I would do if I were him.
We can't do that. We can't do that. That's un-American. There can't be counting votes. Today's November 4th.
No. He wants...
Emma, it's the 4th, not the 3rd. It's the 4th.
I mean, it's already the first time in history we've had to wait so long for this.
This is crazy. This is insanity. You're going to recount?
But stop counting Michigan. But recount Wisconsin.
I have a feeling that's going to undercut his message.
Yeah. Very, very specific requests for when ballots should be and shouldn't be counted in states. And it's almost like it aligns with his interests.
When it's a W, you can count later. But if it's an M or a P or a G, then you have to stop on the 3rd. That's the way it works.
So it is
written. Wrestler Chris Jericho saying, "I'm not a political person, but it is strange to anybody else that for the first time ever, we have to wait 2 days, 5 days, 10 days to find out who won the presidential race."
Guess who's not a political person? Chris Jericho.
Chris Jericho.
Right.
Was he born in 2001?
I'm pretty sure he was born prior to that.
Yeah.
But speaking of the expansion of the squad, I mean, I feel like Cori Bush officially winning. We celebrated when she won her primary, but God, is that exciting?
Yep.
So there are silver linings to this, and at least the Democrats didn't lose the House.
And all the Katie Porter,
still decisive
frontline, supposed frontline Democrat.
Although, I mean, she's in the reddish district, but it's still, it's just interesting, and there will be moratoriums on this, or there will be analyses. It's been unable to be replicated in other states with progressives like that.
Yeah, I think she's just so competent. I mean,
she's good.
Uniquely good.
Yeah.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. This is Jeff in Georgia. How are you?
Jeff in Georgia. How are you, Jeff? What's happening in Georgia?
Answer your first question, how I am. I've been better. Damn.
Yep.
Before I get off rolling, though, I do want to welcome Emma Vigeland to the program. Emma, I've been a big fan for a long time. I try to call semi-regularly, and I just want to let you know that I'm pleased to be able to deliver my silver tones to your ear holes for the first time. I know we're going to be great friends.
Oh, we're already friends. What's your name? I'm sorry.
I'm Jeff in Georgia.
Jeff, I thought
I'm
so.
on Twitter at Jeff His Student.
And we should say also host of the Dissident Peasant, whose program introduced me to the fact that Francis Perkins went to the same high school as my parents.
Oh, there you go.
Correct. I like to talk about history and stuff there. I also started a Twitch stream with some friends of mine at Post Revolution if people want to check that out. But I feel a little bit embarrassed to promote myself so heavily, so I just want to move on before I get any more awkward. Because I want to talk about what I heard you say about Georgia, and I just want to make it clear, even though it's not fun to anybody, to me especially, nobody should be counting on either of those Senate seats or any electoral votes for Joe Biden from Georgia.
Yeah.
And the reason is because the race to watch was the Purdue race, because it was only 3, and David Perdue is incredibly unpopular here, even with a lot of Republicans. That stock trade stuff during the pandemic briefing that he got nailed for, it did piss off a lot of people, I think. I mean, I'm just relaying what I hear anecdotally and through the press, I guess, here. But the fact that he's running up about 200,000 votes right now, and there's only about 200,000 votes left to count altogether in the state, and the fact that he's not going to be running ahead of Donald Trump means that he's probably either going to win outright or go to that runoff. And those runoffs in January, like Warnock's not going to win, and Purdue is going to win the other seat. Like Loeffler is going to stay for at least 2 more years in that special seat. So it'll be the next cycle at the very earliest before the Democrats can take it, which is conceivable to me. But that's still another cycle out.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the more likely scenario. And if you feel that way, being in Georgia, that just reinforces that.
And what's so kind of, I was a fool, I guess, to pin anything on this, but there was talk among people who should know this sort of thing that, dang, maybe even the Democrats might take the General Assembly in the state this cycle, which, if you know anything about how state legislative districts tend to be drawn in a lot of states, they're not. It's very undemocratic. You got to have a huge wave to do that sort of thing. They didn't even come close, not even close. And I think the strategy of Biden running as a man that decent Republicans can vote for, among other things, is what brought a lot of this to a head. And it is incredibly depressing to watch the Democrats refuse to run on the interests of people who work for a living. Now, and I don't really know what else to say about that right now, except at the very least, I hope it does appear that Biden will be the president, at least in name. I said this months ago, even if he became president, he'd never be president, because I'm sorry, he's just not there. Everything he says is somebody else's words. There's a vacancy to him. I think everyone recognizes this. And so he's going to be controlled by the forces most powerful in the Democratic Party. And it's those forces who, did everything they can to stop Bernie Sanders, and they did everything they could to poison down-ballot races and make sure that, I don't think it's that they don't want to win. It's just that they're really afraid of winning too badly. They don't want to dominate. They don't really want.
They're afraid of power. They're afraid of power. There's just no doubt about it.
They're incredibly afraid. They're incredibly afraid.
I mean, again, it's one of those situations where, Joe Biden, his vote tally, and again, I don't know how much the state has expanded necessarily, but his vote tally will be, 10% more than Trump got in 2016. I mean, the thing that complicates the analysis is that more voters came out. You know what I mean? Like Joe Biden is going to end up with, maybe close to 500,000 more votes. I think in Georgia in 2016, I think Clinton got like 1.8, 1.9 million votes, and Biden's going to have like 2.3 million votes. I mean, that's not an insignificant bump. But Trump just got more.
Yeah.
CNN officially calls Wisconsin for Biden, but Donald Trump is going to, in an unheard of situation, call for a recount. I mean,
how can he? I thought the election was yesterday, Sam.
Yeah.
So strange.
What's up with that, man? The last thing I want to say about Georgia, just real briefly, it's kind of bizarre, but I mean, I do not get the sense at all, even among the Republicans of whom I'm, because of where I live, I have no choice but to be around them. There is no sense that Trump bears any responsibility for any of the pandemic's consequences, either public health related or economic. Just none. They don't care. And I got to be honest with you, I'm pretty shocked by that in a country that's lost over 200,000 people to this. At least in our little slice of Georgia, it's not his fault. They don't care.
There's
it's
not
President Xi.
That's another failure of, actually, I don't know. I think the Democrats did try to connect coronavirus deaths and the pandemic to Trump, but there's such a mistrust about blame and where it should lie for politicians, especially in this time of crisis. Nobody is the connection isn't there enough is what I'm saying to how people.
And I think things get. I'm sorry. I just think things get further. I'm sorry. Thank you. I don't mean to interrupt. Our newest and most treasured crew member. But I just want to say that I think it's difficult to make that argument when Joe Biden is so obviously mentally unfit. Just politics aside, I think a regular ass person can look at him and just say, he ain't up for this. He ain't there.
I don't know. I mean, why didn't that regular ass person also say Trump is also mentally unfit? I mean, I don't know. I think there's also, I think we've got to accept the idea that, there's some problematic stuff in this country. But Jeff,
agreed.
Appreciate the call, man.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a good one, man.
All right,
thanks,
bye-bye.
Jeff.
Militant Apathy on the IM makes the point that Trump is the incumbent. What is the probability of beating an incumbent? I mean, it's not easy to beat an incumbent.
Yes, the incumbent's Trump. So that's just my one. But yes, I agree. I think people, they get used to that person as president. A lot of what the race is can you imagine this person as president? Well, if he already is president, you can.
Right.
But it's
still hard.
Yeah, for me, it's
exactly.
Yeah, but it was so disastrous that you would think people would not want to imagine it any longer. That was an overestimation on pollsters' accounts and Democratic operatives' forecasts, obviously.
Let's go. Calling from an 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Josh from Chicago.
Josh from Chicago. What's on your mind, Josh?
Hey, just want to wish you all, first of all, happy anniversary. Emma, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm a huge fan of your work, especially in the primary. Your coverage was awesome.
Thanks so much.
But yeah, I first of all, I think the MVP in this is Rashida Tlaib, because she was basically the get out the vote operation in Michigan. Her ground game was the only real ground game in Michigan, and they basically my understanding is the rural counties went harder for Trump than they did in 2016. But she increased voter turnout by 21%, I think.
Wow.
And basically, Wayne County is going to make the difference as to why Biden is barely going to win Michigan. So let's just if she had lost her primary, which she was never going to, we would have all been fucked, basically. Biden would have lost Michigan. But
well, apparently it's being reported that Donald Trump is filing a lawsuit in Michigan to stop the counting of ballots.
Oh, I'm sure he is. I have no doubt. But the courts did flip in Michigan, the Supreme Court. So we'll see.
Well, yeah, he's filing a lawsuit to stop counting in Michigan, but keep counting in Wisconsin, please.
It's the M and the W. I've said it.
I can't follow this man. I can't follow this guy's train of thought. But yeah, I worked on a race in Max Rose's district, and I mean, I could see that the suburbs, the strategy to appeal to the suburbs, if there's no messaging behind it, and there was messaging on Trump's behalf, it was a completely empty strategy. And I think that tough on crime thing, especially in certain suburbs, was pretty effective for Trump. And because there was no messaging really coming back from Democrats about what they were going to do to help people, there was no way to sort of drive through that message of tough on crime. And it worked, I think, in certain suburbs. And like, unfortunately, I think some of the state legislature races in New York also got lost in that Max Rose race as well. You know, again, the lack of being able to message properly to working people and really have a coherent message, it really, like, it's a huge problem, especially in these down ballot races. And the right was extremely activated in these places. Like, I think people don't realize that, like, suburbs and a lot of these places, they went harder for Trump in some cases than they did in 2016.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's shocking, and
it's disturbing, without a doubt.
Really disturbing. But
back to the drawing board.
Yep.
I feel like we need to have.
Thanks for the call.
Yep.
We got to have Emily Ogden back on to talk about mesmerism, part 2 or something like that. The re-election.
I mean, I think part of it is, look, there's always an increase after, as an incumbent. I mean, we saw it with George Bush.
There's also all the economic numbers where people were reporting they were way better off than 4 years ago before the pandemic happened. Like, I think that's really I think those sorts of things are a bit confounding when you talk about the counties that had more of a death rate from COVID. Like, I think that stat is like pretty galling to look at, but I think there's a lot of different factors that go into that.
Ronnie Chilb tells me on the IM, the way I understood the Missouri Amendment 3 was that it was disguised as anti-corruption, but it was a way to bring back gerrymandered districts after it was previously voted on to have a nonpartisan group do the district drawing. Yeah, that sounded weird to me. That sounded weird to me. All right, do we have Jamie?
Here I am.
How are you feeling today, Jamie?
You know, I'm feeling all right. My cats have been waking me up a little early because they don't recognize daylight savings time. But then I realized,
with kids too, I can assure you.
Yeah, but then I realized, I forgot to set the to reset the clock on the stove, and of course that's the only clock they have because they're cats. They don't have cell phones, so hopefully that should do the trick.
That they will wise up a little bit. Yeah, it doesn't help with the kid. I can tell you that. I still feel like we got another couple of weeks for him waking me up at like 5:30.
Well, we were a little rushed last night, but first off the bat, I want to say welcome to Emma. It's nice to have another girl on the show. And if you ever want to do some girl stuff together, like coming to my Capital reading group or my Black Radicalism and Class Struggle reading group, you are totally invited.
So down. Thank you so much. Total girl stuff. I thought you were going to go with braiding each other's hair, but that's way girlier. That's way girlier.
Girls only want one thing.
Right. Is capitalist reading group.
It's disgusting. What are your feelings today, Jamie, aside from the fallback situation or the fallback situation? I mean, we could say both.
You know, yeah, I mean, they are I would say we're in a bit of an omni crisis between my cats waking me up early and, what's going on in our country. I'm not too good at the wonky stuff. I think you guys covered the failures pretty well that the Democratic Party committed in this election. I would always beat the drum of offers people something material and that will get people to vote for you for what that's worth. I think Bernie would have done much better, but we're probably not going to get a chance to test that out for quite some time. So who the hell knows? But
I mean, I look at a race like Kara Eastman's, right, which is supposedly that test case, right? I mean, and she did worse this time. And I don't know if it was because of something specific in terms of like campaigning, if Bacon went out and did more door to door than she did, or she was outspent.
It's hard you can't underestimate how much the presidential race and the messaging from that affects it. I mean,
that's the thing, is it's hard to know. I mean, it's hard to know. What was Donald Trump offering materially?
Well, good question. It's tempting because, like, you look at polls, like even a Fox News poll, something like 73% of Americans in this Fox News poll supports having a national health service. You look at that and you think, oh, wow, maybe if somebody ran on that, they would get people to vote for them. But, the way that these things shake down in real life is often not that simple, and it's full of contradictions. And there are so many social forces and so many processes that have brought us to this point in time, including, decades of systemic rot, decades of, this neoliberal phase of capitalism. But, just putting Medicare for all in a platform might not be enough to undo that. But I tend to take the long view on these things, which I know bothers people sometimes, but this is sorry.
It's a welcome perspective. I mean, I still come back to the Democrats' complete inability to connect material conditions on the ground to what they were offering and what Republicans were offering. And I think we're kind of zeroing in on the fact that nationally, the party, both Schumer, Pelosi, and also Biden, were so fixated on Trump that they were not making policy cases about Republicans and, Democrats. And
I don't even I'm not even sure saying it as policy differences are the right way of doing it. They're just not looking for political opportunities.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, it wouldn't have mattered what was in that $1.8 trillion. I'm being just sort of like very just, I'm trying to strip away and get to this sort of the essential element of what I'm talking about. It wouldn't have mattered what was in that $1.8 trillion package. The only thing that mattered is that Mitch McConnell didn't want to pass it. And when it wasn't thrown into the Senate, he didn't have to deal with it. That's the only thing that mattered. Mm-hmm. Like, it didn't matter what was in it or not in it. It's just like there was no wedge issue that he had to deal with. If that had gone into the Senate, it would have been like a grenade. It would have just like forced a fracture in the caucus. The idea that they would have passed it with with the majority of Democrats, the Republicans would have had to pass it, and it would have undercut what they were doing in some way. And so it was almost like devoid of policy. It was just like, make a move, do something aggressive, stop playing rope-a-dope when, they're rope-a-doping and their opponent is looking at them going like, dude, we're playing soccer.
Yeah.
Why are you cowering like this in the corner of the field? We're playing soccer.
I also think like Trump's mixed messaging in this whole COVID thing. I think he's mastered. Remember, Sam, your Bachman example of she was speaking to the wrong camera? I think Trump's mastered the ability to speak to certain cameras in certain moments, because if you're a person who wanted to think that like Trump took COVID seriously, he had that line like, I shut down China and Joe Biden didn't. And the same thing with the stimulus, right? Like he did all this messaging like, Pelosi's stopping us from having this big deal. And I think the way that he sort of triages what they're actually doing, they did that with, I think, like the black vote and Latino vote too. They'll do enough to like kind of paper over and attack the margins. And I wish the Democrats could fight that a little bit.
And I will say this too, that the Bachmann effect was a while ago. And the difference now is that to a large extent, there is such a self-sufficient, hermetically sealed right-wing media landscape that it is now possible for them to just exclusively operate within that realm. And so all that Trump needs to do is throw that out there, and he's not doing it for the CNN crowd. He's just doing it for his own crowd. It is, again, it's like sort of the functional equivalent of, we're going to do a naturalization ceremony at the RNC, and anybody who is hesitant about voting for me, there's your license. You can vote for me now because I gave you the one arrow you needed in your quiver to prove to yourself or to prove to your daughter who moved to New York City or whatever it is that I am not anti-immigrant, and there it is. There's your talking point. And that's all they need. They just need one thing to rebut. And, like how many, like you saw that Michael Schur interview with the people about COVID where he says to this woman, he says, do you take COVID seriously? And she's like, I certainly do. I know 2 or 3 people who died from it. And how come you don't wear your mask around your 92-year-old immunodeficient mom? Well, I think it's a little overblown. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Like all we need is that one. Like we're going to disengage after we say that one thing about, whatever the response is. And then we generally don't have to follow up. And that's basically all that they needed. Here is from, what is Daniel's real name? Daniel Nickanian, who was a guest, I guess the last week, I can't remember. He had come on and was talking about some of the important races involving ICE. And his argument is that there's a lot of local races where the rubber literally meets the road on the implementation of some of these ICE policies. And he said one of the biggest local Democratic gains comes in Miami-Dade, which is surprising because that was a complete disaster.
Right, exactly.
Daniela Levine Cava will take over the powerful mayor's office, replacing Republican. One huge reason is ICE. This is one of my top elections to watch, he writes, for breaking ICE's reach. Miami's outgoing incumbent had put place policies that cooperate with ICE. Cava had actually voted against those and has strongly opposed them, which is also sort of like, how do you reconcile the mayor who ran on, anti-ICE? Maybe there wasn't strong enough message from Biden to come in there and didn't exploit that. I mean, I don't know.
I also wonder just about Trump, and I'm sure this is just along the margins, but his insistence on continuing to do rallies like that had to, in a COVID time when there's nothing else going on in some of these swing states. I wonder if that ginned up more enthusiasm than maybe we gave it credit for.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Possibly. And then is it Dave Wasserman? It says, to my eye, Biden is likely hitting the targets he needs in Pennsylvania counties to be on track to finish ahead. Recounts don't typically overturn the margins we're likely to see for him in Michigan and Wisconsin. Biden does prevail in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and then Arizona, Georgia, Nevada wouldn't matter to the outcome. That would be 279, 280 or something like that. But anyways, the point is he would win,
right?
Regardless of Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada. So I think we're going to know, and it appears we're going to have a President Biden, and I think we will know by Friday end of show.
Yeah, and then it just depends on margin of victory in terms of Trump's legal battles.
Right. Exactly.
If he can afford it.
So one thing that's been coming up in discussion online and everything is like the disconnect between certain ballot measures and how people are voting, which we've been talking about. And I just don't understand, like in the case of Florida, like how do you not tie Republicans to not wanting to raise the minimum wage or supporting those measures? In the same way that like DeSantis dismantled the added the poll tax to reenfranchising.
There's so much fear. There's so much fear by Schumer and Pelosi and Democratic leadership of tying the members of their caucus to any specific policy position. I mean, yeah, it's they want to be as fungible and flexible as possible, and it's the weakest thing I've ever seen, because Republicans will promise things and just not follow through too.
I mean, I think that's part of it. There's also that factor. Have you heard those like focus groups where they sit down? This happened, I think, with like during the Romney. I mean, I hear about this every cycle where they will sit down with a focus group and they'll say Republicans want to, cut taxes on billionaires or they want to get rid of the ACA. And the focus group is just like, I don't believe you. And they're like, no, that's what they're no.
Yeah.
Don't believe it.
Well,
why would anybody
they've heard it all before.
Why would anybody ever do that? They would never run on that. That's a lie. And I think that
there's this. There also is just like this fatigue where they're like, both sides do it.
Well,
both sides do it.
And I think this is what we opened up with on some level is you need to start on day one, because you're not going to convince anybody in, the last 6 months of a campaign that Republicans, are bad. You need to show them on day one why they're bad, and then show them on day 2 and day 3 and 4 and 5 and so on until 500 days later, it's the midterms. And hey, remember what happened? Wait, 365? Make that 700 days later. It's the midterms. And remember that story we told you on day 1 and day 10 and day 20 and day 30 and so on? Story is still true. And I think it is just a question of like performing politics better.
Yeah. Well, the problem is occurring on multiple levels, right? Because on the one hand, the platform leaves something to be desired. The rhetoric leaves something to be desired. Like, people all over this country are dying because they don't have health care. And you have a guy getting up there and saying, oh, yeah, I would veto Medicare for all, even if it does make it through Congress. You have, a historic uprising against the police, against racist police violence, against, the Black working class of this country, and lots of other people as well. And you have a guy getting up and saying, I want to give more money to the cops. So part of it is, the platform itself. But part of it, too, is even when they do have some good things in the platform, like the $15 an hour minimum wage, they absolutely do not run on it. And people don't even know that they believe in that stuff or that they are even saying that they'll do it. And a lot of the time when they try to, like when Trump would try to push Biden to say he's running on progressive stuff, Biden has to say, he doesn't have to say it. He goes and says, oh, no, don't worry, I'm not a socialist, and apologizes for policies that are actually very popular and that people like, because God forbid, they should actually have to follow through on some of this stuff.
His campaign was just as much as possible. I am not in favor of any of that. That's basically, that could have been his one half of his slogan. It's, I'm a good guy, but I'm not in favor of anything.
Come on,
not
man.
so fast, Jack.
Exactly. I mean, and I don't know, Biden's the least of the problem, right? Because you had people out there. There's a bigger problem, I think, with just sort of Democrats just doing politics, because Kara Eastman's out there. She's offering all those things, and she got beat worse this time.
Yeah, I need to look at the specifics of that race to see what I think
she actually got the money.
Yeah, that one was a gut punch for sure.
I mean, we are looking at decades of depoliticization among the populace, which is to say,
but again, also we had record turnout this time. We had record turnout in 2018. We had record turnout this time.
Well, you can be depoliticized and still turn out to vote, because I'm defining it as a failure to believe that a better world is possible, and an investment in things as they are, which can lead to people thinking, oh, well, this tepid incrementalism of the Democratic Party is the best option on the table, and it's the best we're going to do.
Yeah, it's who the Democratic Party seems worthy of investment, basically, right now. And I mean, this is all the critiques we had during the Obama administration of where the Democratic Party went wrong, like during the Clinton years, basically. Yeah. This is all that coming to fruition, basically.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 646 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 646. 646. Okay, let's go to 508. You son of a bitch. I was getting really excited too. I thought 508. They hit me with the Massachusetts area code.
It's such a stupid little...
I love that guy.
Yeah.
I think that was actually not that guy, but it was that guy's son. 646, who's this? Still not there. That must be also the other cricketer fraud. Call from
1, 2, 3, 4.
What? 1, 2, 3, 4. What? 414.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Sam.
Yeah.
This is Joe calling from Milwaukee.
Joe from Milwaukee. What's happening in Milwaukee, Joe?
Some little bit less stress now that they've called the election for us.
I know, it's exciting. Ish.
But I mostly wanted to call about the losses that the Democrats felt nationally in terms of the House.
Okay.
And from my estimation, why it possibly could have happened.
I'd like an answer.
From what I see, it was because you would have a guest on a few weeks ago talking about how down-ballot candidates liked having Biden over Bernie because they didn't have to answer socialist questions.
That was a big liability, I think, in Florida, frankly, on some level. I think the socialist thing, works with some of those,
And Biden had been running ads for years at this point about socialist. I mean, sorry, Trump had been running ads about socialist Democrats. Castro.
I wonder if at the same time, because the Biden strategy was flip Republican voters, that those Republican voters, even if they did vote for Biden in the presidential, they weren't going to vote Democratic down ballot. So specifically targeting those voters to try to flip to the Democratic Party down ballot was a much harder task because they weren't voting against Trump down ballot. They were voting against the Democrats.
That's exactly what we opened up with, which is that's why this is a failure of Pelosi and Schumer, because they are not, they're not attacking the foundation that Donald Trump sits upon. And meanwhile, they're also just opening up the foundation of every down ballot Democrat running is built on a house of sand, essentially. Exactly. Apparently, Biden won Kara Eastman's district.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be just like if you run just that Donald Trump is bad, you're just basically it's a jump ball as to what Republicans are going to do.
Right. Well, yeah, screw you down ballot. We're not going to make the case about the Democratic agenda. We're not going to make the case about why it's different from the Republican agenda. We're just hoping that we get the bad orange man out and Biden wins and Democrats have a sugar high for 2 years before the GOP licks its wounds and comes back.
Yep.
Exactly. I mean, even my district, Ryan Steil, the Republican, won with 60% of the vote. But Biden carried almost 60% of the vote in the presidential election.
Well,
so we're talking about they voted for Biden and the Republican for the House.
I mean, it's a good point.
Suburbs.
It's a good point. Sometimes you actually got to sort of do politics, apparently.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, for part of it is just that how the Democrats failed to point out that when Trump and the Republicans refused to get money for state and local governments in the relief bill, that would also ultimately affect police budgeting because their budgeting comes from state and local funding.
Right. I mean, there's just like a massive failure by the Democrats, and it has been basically, and I think, honestly, I genuinely believe it is still a generational thing, because Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they came out of that era in the early 90s where it's like government is the problem and, we're going to be lean and mean. And then all of a sudden, like, people wake up to the idea that, you know what, it sort of feels like the people want government to do something and they just know how to, like, they don't know how to pivot on that. And it's sort of like, you watch like people like AOC or, just any of the members of the squad, and they come in, and Katie Porter does it from an oversight perspective, and Ilhan Omar has her and Talib have their sort of like, the perspectives they bring this to, and AOC has her perspective, and they all have like, they're all advocating for something that is consistent with a bigger narrative, and we just don't see that from Nancy Pelosi. But I appreciate the call.
All right, thank you so much. Left is best.
Left is best. Thank you. Trump campaigned to host a press conference in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, with Eric Trump, Lara Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Pam Bondi, and Corey Lewandowski. I sort of want to watch that.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be comedy gold, but also terrifying.
Do they announce their network? Like the media project they're launching?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be great.
If they have money left over after these legal battles.
That would be fun too. That would be like, we're demanding a recount, and also let's go to the 215 area code. I think I know who this is.
Hi, Sam. How
Mindy!
are you? First of all, I want to say hi to Emma.
I knew that's what you wanted to do.
Hello.
I wanted to say hi. I wanted to say hi to my girl, Jamie. And I wanted
Hey, Mandy.
Congratulations. Hi. And I wanted to say congratulations on your 10-year anniversary.
Thank you.
I don't know. My area is like fucked up. I mean,
did they vote? How did it go? You had the whole. Aren't we supposed to hear now the sign theory?
Yeah, they don't know. They don't know. There's 2.6 million votes not counted in Pennsylvania. 600,000 of them. Trump's up 600,000. It looks like Montgomery County, the three counties around Philadelphia are Bucks, Montgomery, and Delaware County.
You're in Bucks, right?
I'm in Bucks.
Okay,
Montgomery
now wait
County,
a second, Mindy. Wait a second. You called in a week ago. You said there were signs everywhere. I said, I don't know if that's an indication of anything. And you said it is. Believe me. What were the results from Bucks County?
They're not in yet. They're not in yet. I don't think they're in yet. I think the mail-in is not in. I mean, it's up in person, but the mail-in's not in yet.
Right.
And everybody I know mailed in, except for me and my husband. We're the only two people I know that went to the polls. And I waited an hour and 50 minutes, and he waited like 45. But everybody else I know mailed it in, and they're still like trying to track their vote, and like it hasn't been counted yet. So I don't know where we stand, but out of the three counties around the Philadelphia area, the richest one is Montgomery County, and that seems like it's going blue. And Chester County is the biggest blue collar one, and that seems like it's going blue. And mine's the biggest middle class one, but mine seems like it's still holding on to the red a little bit. But there's a couple problems here that I guess we didn't factor into it. I mean, we have a gigantic, huge Russian population here. Like, not like Russian, like just here from Russia, huge Russian population. And they're all Republicans, because I was talking to one online yesterday, and he was talking to me about how everything's all boarded up in Manhattan, and they're pissed off because it's Biden's fault. Like, they're really like bought into this whole Trump thing. Plus, a lot of them.
I gotta say, there is, and maybe this people will perceive this as a, maybe this is too broad a stereotype, but my sense of Russian emigres is they're coming from a society where the things are a little bit sort of right wing in a way, and I mean we see this in Israel. Certainly, a big part of the problem we have with the settlements. And it has been the influx of Russian immigrants over the past, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And I'm not saying this is all the case with all of them.
A more conditioned positive reaction to authoritarian crackdowns than maybe necessarily.
I think that's a very diplomatic way of putting it.
Right. Like, I was talking to this guy yesterday in front of me, and he told me that they're so much happier here. You know, thick accent. I mean, really thick. They're so much happier here. They like the order.
Thick accent, huh, Mindy?
What?
Thick accent?
You know, I have a thick accent. I know I have a thick accent. I like that thick thing going on. Okay, then the other thing is, I had new floors put in my house this week. I had new floors put in my house this week, and I had the contractors that also lived here from Bucks County, and I was talking to them for like 4 days, and they were not hard Trump supporters, but they were talking to me with a lot of Trump Fox News talking points, and they just think that everybody's corrupt and nobody's doing anything for them, and because they're doing better financially, they're just sticking with Trump. And also there's don't like make fun of me, but they're all Joe Rogan fans. Like, they love Joe Rogan. I don't think we should underestimate the power of Joe Rogan.
No,
I don't underestimate the power. You had like what, almost 400,000 people on his stream yesterday or something?
I don't know. I mean, I know there is kind of a very specific, and I feel like Matt Binder who seems to really understand online culture, would probably have better take on this than me. But there is a young white male apolitical viewer who consumes Joe Rogan on a daily basis, where like there's just skepticism of government that's pushed, but not necessarily an explicit right-wing ideology. And so sometimes that can be free-floating and free-forming. And in an election like this, if you're pretty skeptical of government and maybe are indoctrinated to be a little more conspiratorial, I feel like that trends more towards Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. So they were sitting there talking about like Joe. So not only, I mean, they weren't like full on Trump talking points. I mean, Fox talking points, and they weren't full on Joe Rogan, but you could definitely hear Joe Rogan coming through, and you could definitely hear Fox News coming through. And it was weird because the father was here, who's 70, who was like totally like, I didn't even want to talk to him. He was like scary to me. But my husband was talking to him, and he's like 70, 75. He's been a floor contractor for years, and he knew like a zillion people that got screwed from Trump in Atlantic City. And he was like talking about how he hated Trump. And then yesterday when he came in my house, he told me he voted for him. So
why?
I don't know. Because I don't know if it's they're skeptical of the God. This is what I was reading. And these were all the people that were in that area, like Levittown, PA, and all that, like the Bucks County, where they said there was 3-4 hour lines. Did you hear about that yesterday? There were 3-4 hour lines. Like, they were like the more blue collar part of Bucks County. And he just said to me, you know, they're all corrupt. They hate Nancy. I mean, really, like, thinks Nancy has horns coming out of her head. They don't like Trump. I mean, like, they don't like Chuck. They don't like Nancy. And they don't trust government. They just really, and this was the thing that was really bad. The guy, the main contractor guy, the guy Rick, that was the guy I hired, he's 50. His wife she just had a baby, and in the delivery, her heart, she had a heart attack. So now she's all messed up. And she's got to get like some kind of big thing put in, like defibrillator, I don't know, something next week. So he was talking to me about, I said, Rick, you're not going to have insurance. And they all say the same thing. There's the same answer from every single one of them. That will never happen. Nobody's going to let that happen. Rick, they're going to take away your Medicare. That will never happen. Rick's dad, they're going to take away your Social Security. That will never happen. They won't let it happen.
Yep.
That's like that focused.
That's what Perrine always talks about with that focus group stuff. They literally don't believe the Republicans will do what they say they'll do.
I mean, that is a kind of depoliticization as well, right? Just a lack of belief that things are going to change in either direction.
Well, but that's not exactly what it is. It's that they don't believe that the Republicans have the policies that they have. They just don't believe it.
Because we're not good. Like, I mean, like, I am so, like, I hate Nancy so much right now. Like, I just don't, I mean, we can't get rid of her fast enough. We have to get rid of her, Diane, Feinstein, all those people, like Chris Coons won yesterday. All those people have to go. And I'm not, like, I was thinking about it. I was talking to Jay's wife, Jay, who calls the show, last night. And we were like thinking maybe Bernie would have won. I don't know if Bernie would have won. Do you think Bernie would have won? I don't know. I
don't know. I mean, I think that if he would have won, it wouldn't have been a dramatic, a more dramatic victory than Biden's. It might be slightly different. It might be constructed in a slightly different way. But I think that it's possible that if Bernie had been the candidate, that Down-ballot may have won more. I'm not sure. I mean, because they seem to have...
Down-ballot did not look good here. The down-ballot's not good. I mean, my neighbor won again, Wendy, the one behind.
Because there was no down-ballot story. There was no narrative for the down-ballot. I mean, what was it? It was Joe Biden's going to beat Donald Trump, and the Democrats, like we started at the beginning of the show, have not made it clear that Donald Trump sits atop an edifice built by the Republican Party.
Okay, last thing.
Yeah, we got to go. We got to go.
I know. But let me just tell you the very last thing. They're scared, these floor guys, that Biden's going to die and then Kamala's going to be president. Like, that's where their bigotry comes back into it.
I mean, I'm not convinced. Listen, part of the reason why Nancy Pelosi is demonized by the right is because a big part of it is because she's a woman. Like AOC still has more name recognition on the right than she does on the left. And that is, again, a failure of broadly, I mean, the Democratic apparatus. It's like, why isn't she being like, you've got, I don't know. It's like, we're going to bench Michael Jordan. Like we'll put him in maybe in the second half for like a quarter or something like that. I mean, come on. She's a superstar.
You know what? That's what they did to Michael Jordan in the 80s in some of his early coaches. So maybe we just need a change of a coach and we can get our star out onto the plane.
I agree. Mindy, appreciate the call.
Sam, I'll keep you posted. I'll DM you with the results of my area.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Have a good day.
Right.
Hi, Emma.
Bye. Very thick accent. Tokyo Gouda, wondering if we can expand the mod base on YouTube. Notice an uptick in trolls, creepers over the past few weeks. I'd like to volunteer and know a few others who would like to help. Send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Please. All right. we're going to wrap up a little bit early today, folks. I mean, it's not even going to be that early because, you know, we did 13 and a half hours yesterday. That's that's a lot of content. I want to remind you that Nomi's show is on after this one, right at 3 p.m. So you can. Oh, she's got Matt Stoller, Zed Jelani, and Jordan Zakarian on. So check out the Nomi Key Show. You can find it at youtube.com. The Nomi Key Show. Let me read a couple IMs, then we'll get out of here. Sam Fan 1. Sam's show is like Charlie's Angels with good politics now. Hi, Emma.
Hey.
Oh my God. Jesus. We're such a screwed up country. I'm sorry. Jeebus, what does this election say about the U.S.? Am I wrong to have the gut reaction of F Americans for a few decades? I mean, I feel like no American has the excuse of ignorance of what the Trump administration is at this point. At this point, I'm not feeling like F democracy, but maybe I'm overreacting. Can you tell me I'm wrong to feel this way? You know, I read a decent post at Empty Wheel by Rain. I don't know who that is. Rayne. We're so not through here. And it's in response to another poster at Empty Wheel about the belief that the union is done. And I don't know. I found it pretty compelling. Their arguments are like we have a lot of problems like a lot of other countries do. But we also have, you know, aspirations and a promise that some other countries don't.
Yeah. I like the Harvey K attitude in this sense, to be honest.
I mean, look, this is not unique to America, right? Right-wing nationalist authoritarianism is on the rise all over the world. It does seem to be especially bad in America, where fascism has been baked into the cake from the beginning, seeing as we were a settler colonialist nation founded on the genocide of the indigenous people, as well as slavery. Remember that. And those things aren't going away. And it does seem like there's an especially bad iteration of it here. It does not seem like it's purely racism. I think there are other things going on, but that is certainly central to it. And you got to tie this to crisis as well. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that these kinds of politics rear their heads when there is widespread crisis in the global capitalist system.
And lack of coherent opposition on the left too.
Sure.
Yeah, a reading recommendation would be Ira Katznelson's "Fear Itself," which is about the maybe not the last, but a prominent global fascism rise in the 30s, basically, and how we emerged from that. And you know, there's some liberals that are going to collaborate, and there are some that are actually going to maybe be allies. And I don't know, it's going to be tough, but. We've been through this stuff before. It's happened.
Yeah, it sounds reductive to say that fascism is capitalism in decay, and that is reductive, but I think it has a lot of explanatory power for why these things happen the way they do when they happen.
Stephen from Florida. Well, we voted for a fascist again in Florida, but somehow voted to increase the minimum wage to $15 by 2026 with more than 60% of the vote. I will never understand Florida. I also
that's Biden's position. Did he advertise it at all?
Reminds me that
ostensible position.
Michael from Florida no longer owes me any grapefruits from Florida. No.
Sam, did you know about Biden's Taft-Hartley stuff?
I mean, only when it came up on the show the other day, to be honest with you.
Right, yeah.
That makes me feel better.
And it is not terribly different from the way that like Clinton ran her campaign, which was, I got a decent platform. If you actually dug into it, there'd be things in there that the left would actually genuinely like and would be a huge improvement over where Democratic politics have been. But I don't need to talk about it too much because I'm just running here as the not that guy.
Anyway, let's talk about it for him, and especially
Yes.
when it looks like he's going to win.
Yeah, we definitely should. I mean, well, over the next couple of days, we'll start to sort of like, take that tact as to, how do you, it's all going to be set up, right? It's all going to be teeing up something for 2022 at this point. And then there's also going to be, Dayan is going to revisit, and he mentioned on the program last night, that list of things that a president can do with executive authority and does not need control of both houses of Congress. And Nevada will not release election results until tomorrow at noon Eastern time. So that'll be something to talk about on the show tomorrow.
Basically so Wisconsin, they pulled that off. Nevada, Biden's likely to pull that off. Michigan, way too close for comfort. That, it should have been way more of a landslide, but I would imagine that they win that, and then Pennsylvania too, and then that takes Biden to 290. I don't think North Carolina's going to come back around for Biden. Georgia, I don't think so either. So, I don't know. I mean, the 290, that's not a mandate by any stretch.
Well, that's the other thing.
Right.
It's a mandate. You get elected, it's a mandate. This whole notion of a mandate, F that. I've been hearing the word mandate for, every single day, every single time a Republican wins, they don't have a mandate, then they just operate like they do have a mandate.
Well, they lose the popular vote, and then
if you win the presidency, you have a mandate. Period. End of story. Do you even hear anybody say like Donald Trump doesn't have a mandate to do that? Did we ever talk about that? Like, I don't even like the words mandate only come up after a Democrat wins to say they don't have a mandate. And you know what? If he's president, he's got a mandate. Period.
I mean, we talk about it. We talk about it all the time on this show, how undemocratic it is with the electoral college and
literally
gerrymandering.
The word mandate.
Yeah.
The word mandate,
No.
like I think if we go into Google Trends, you can see the word mandate pop up whenever Democrats win.
Right.
And it's always negative.
It's implicitly about restraint, right? Like, you have this power, but be restrained about it anyway.
Exactly. 100% mandate. If he gets 270 electoral votes, that is a 100% mandate, as far as I'm concerned. All right, let's race through these IMs and get out of here. Shelby from Phoenix, the entire Dem establishment must go. Chuck Schumer has no clue how to win. We need people who are unapologetic about implementing policies related to the working class issues. I mean, look, I keep saying this. I think that in some instances, those issues are helpful to win, but we first need, and I think there may be a relationship between having an ideological perspective and being able to operate politics properly. But I'm quite convinced that you can also perform politics properly by weakening the other party. And I don't think that is a exclusively or maybe even predominantly a function of your ideology. Like, you know, you don't necessarily need that to make it work.
I think we also have a lot of base building work to do. Like, just putting material benefits in a platform and running on them, I like to think that they would move the needle a bit, but they might not because of depoliticization. People in this country do not have a lot of experiences of solidarity. It has to be experienced to be believed. And we're going to need to do that more than once every 4 years. We're going to need to build working class institutions like organized labor, like tenant unions, like mutual aid, like solidarity networks all over the place before we see the kind of substantial progress in the electoral and legislative sphere that we're talking about.
I think that's true to a certain extent. But I mean, if you go back to Mindy's example, right, that's not a question of, I don't think you need to convince those guys to vote for Joe Biden. I think you need to convince those guys to not vote for the Republicans. And because I don't know if you can ever get them to sign on to the idea that, like, well, I'm not, because what if Kamala Harris comes in? Like, you know, because it's, you know, like, we all know that Kamala Harris is not going to fundamentally change the ideology that Joe Biden represents.
Oh, she's a socialist,
And
I hear. But...
They have that perception, I think, because of some predispositions they may have to aspects about what Kamala Harris projects from the TV.
Yeah.
But when Mindy says to them, they're going to cut your Medicare, okay, we want them to be like,
wait,
maybe they'll cut my Medicare.
Yeah.
Like, that's all that I am saying, you know, that is the bare minimum. I agree that we need to build these other institutions because that's how we deal with taking over the Democratic Party. But, and I know you want to establish a third party or a third entity ultimately, but we got to go through that first phase anyways. But in terms of defeating Republicans, I mean, the Democrats brought out record number of voters, you know, and in terms of winning this election, you need to have Mindy say to the flooring guy, dude, they're going to cut your stuff, and have them go like, oh yeah. All right, we got to get out of here.
That's part of the project as well.
All right.
And turnout was down in some places in some demographics. Like, I just looked at a tweet thread by Malika Jabali about black turnout in the Rust Belt, and it went down in some states.
From 2012 or not from
2016.
Really?
Yeah.
The same thing with Miami-Dade, right?
Miami-Dade, indeed, in Miami-Dade. Well, in Miami-Dade, I think so. I know certainly in the Hispanic community, they lost votes.
Right. I think certain communities, Biden just didn't really.
I'm not clear if they went down as a percentage of the vote or if they went down in real terms.
Yeah. The Latino vote is something that you really can't look at as a monolith, right? Like, people are freaking out like, oh, Latinos, they flipped from Bernie to Trump. That's not true. Like, Trump brought out a very different cohort of Latinos than Bernie would have.
But the issue in Texas is real, though, and that is an accurate point. But I mean, Hillary, the Zapata County.
Yeah, there's something very strange happened there.
Second most Hispanic county in America. Obama won it by 43 points. Hillary won it by 33 points, and Biden lost it by 5 points.
That's weird. There's something very weird about that. Tham Theater, DC is 93.4% to 5.2% Biden to Trump. Wow, they hate him here. Tim Pulitzer, when you focus your party campaign strategy on being anti-Trump, underperforming in the House and Senate seems like a predictable, if not inevitable result. Will from Mississippi, medical marijuana in Mississippi, but Dems can't shut it down early. Apneva, is it possible that COVID death counties going for Trump is essentially the same data? Pro-Trump counties might be particularly anti-mask, so they're already pro-Trump. Right. Yes. No, I agree. You just would think that like if death around you isn't going to sort of like refocus your mind on what's going on, I'm not sure what will. Sammy Binkow, how can DNC strategists like Favreau say, let us handle the disappointment and distinction internally when they just botched 2 slam dunk elections against one of the most polarizing people in modern history? Craig in Portland, remember the consequences of last night include no real changes to state houses, so a lottery districting will keep conservatives in Congress again for 10 more years. Yes, I know it. Teacher Dan, yes, Democrats lose and have lost on purpose. Oh, I'm done with that conversation. You keep every day you say, I didn't say they lose on purpose.
It's of course too late in the day to start.
I feel like this is a Nomiki talking point that maybe she can expound upon.
Jackie Daytona, Florida passes 15 minimum wage, but the state went to Trump. Yeah. Lumpy, please no more stories about Susan Collins is now at risk due to making certain votes. Ordinary Mainers will punish her later at the ballot box. It's just not true.
Yeah.
Dave Rubinating, based upon the current vote totals in Wisconsin, Michigan, it looks like Libertarian candidate Joe Jorgensen's playing the spoiler for Trump. Yeah, Sam, does this mean that you will thank those people for their childlike devotion to corporate feudalism and be grateful for them? I might send them a muffin basket. Bandongino, the way results are leaning, it looks like 270 to 268 for Biden, raising an insane risk of faithless electors. Not so clear on that.
I don't know, because Pennsylvania would take him to 290, and Pennsylvania's looking good as of right now.
Andrew from D.C., my theory, there is a referendum on the brand of the Democratic Party. Prime example being Collins. Democrats can't wrap their head around the fact that people largely hate them. They think they are weak and never do anything good. Owning the libs is the most central GOP platform, and it's stunningly effective. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's true everywhere, but I think, yes. I think in terms of a brand, it's a weak brand, without a doubt. That's the whole point. Canadian Observer, Sam needs to replace Schumer. Okay. Evan from New Jersey, Trump is a social drug for disaffected people who may or may not be a bully or victim of bullies who has Stockholm. Danny, 1360, do you think Sanders would have performed better, would have underperformed with the Latinx vote? I think he might have done better. He seemed to take it seriously. Mex Marine, I got in Arizona, I got lots of calls and engagement by the local Dems, English and Spanish. Please Schechter, Judy Gold. Hi, Sammy. You're going to have Brianna Joy Gray to discuss how she might have actually had a point. Left is still best. I'm not sure I know what the point was. Crass rebuttal. How come no left media was talking about this is an election that redraws gerrymandered districts, or no one has been talking about the power Bernie and Sherrod Brown were poised to gain in the Senate? I mean, are you serious? I think we talked about that often. Left is beast. We can now see the only way to fight fascism is leftist organizing. This other BS isn't working. Well,
That's
I mean,
right.
It's not like they're mutually exclusive. Nobody's been saying don't do that.
Well, except Democratic consultants who just want snazzy ad buys and.
Yeah, if we define Amy McGrath as this other BS, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, leftist organizing is nobody's saying don't do that.
No, I think that I would define that to include what Ilhan Omar did in Minnesota. I wouldn't exclude the electoral part of what she's doing there at all. I think it'd be a mistake.
All right, 3 more. Bullprog. Minnesota GOP helped siphon off Dem votes with the Marijuana Reform Party and maintain control at this point of the State House. Almost guarantee no marijuana reform soon. My brain's in recovery mode. Last night proved the Lincoln Project was a total failure. Lincoln Project senior advisor Rachel Bitkofer admitted on Twitter last night, maybe I'm less depressed than the rest of you because I never expected any Republicans to help beat Trump and thus am not depressed that they failed to materialize. What? Salinas Lefty, considering the squad has grown while the Democratic majority shrank, is this at least good news for progressives, right? Yep. Bitkofer was way off. Goes to show you take the words of prognosticator as gospel because they nail one election. Silver ball stud. Such a sobering reality. My friends tell me I'm too political. I tell them the only way out of this is more involvement, not less. Many say I'm too vehement. Today, a few of them are already making excuses like Biden couldn't campaign due to the virus or we need to get rid of the Electoral College. One even brought up Bernie or bust. Going to get one of them a gift subscription to the show, but what else help these people own the loss? I don't know. And the final IM of the day, Disco Stew. Pretty sure Biden outperformed Ilhan Omar in her own district. What does that say of anything? I think it could say that maybe Biden was more popular than Omar in that district, but that she could still have brought people to the table that he couldn't have.
Yeah. I mean, that district's very
not really exclusive.
Yeah, there's a lot to say about that district, but it's I don't
I mean,
think
they both won. Let's put it that way.
Mandate.
And last one, Neff. When Pelosi became Speaker in 2018, she agreed to step down as Speaker in 2022 as part of that deal. Yes, I know. I hope she does it sooner. All right, folks. See you tomorrow. Check out Nomi's show. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good job, everybody, tonight. Bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. Finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know